Right, so we're back for another deep dive, and today we're going to tackle a case that's been, well, it's been kind of haunting me, honestly, ever since I first heard about it.
Yeah, this one really gets to you.
It does.
The Mitrice Richardson case.
Mitrice Richardson, yeah.
It just sticks with you.
And what's so crazy is we've got articles, interviews, like court documents, the whole thing.
Oh, yeah, we went deep.
Yeah, we went deep on this one, and it still feels like there's this huge cloud of mystery hanging over the whole thing.
Absolutely. And I think that's why it's captivated so many people for so long.
For sure. And, you know, I think before we even get into the details of what happened, we should really talk about who Mitrice was.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this wasn't just a case file. This was a real person.
Right. A 24-year-old woman from Los Angeles, college graduate, wanted to be a psychologist.
And from everything we've seen, she had this bright future ahead of her, you know, a whole life to live.
And then September 2009, it all just changes. And this all starts in, of all places, Malibu.
Malibu, right. Not exactly where you expect a story like this to begin.
No, not at all. And it's not just about the location. It's about the setting, too.
Oh, yeah, we're talking Jeffrey's, like a high-end, fancy restaurant.
Yeah, fancy restaurant. Malibu, it sets a certain tone.
Yeah.
You know, and that contrast between that setting and what happens to Mitrice, it's important.
It really is, because Malibu, it's known for its affluence, right?
Yeah.
It's wealthy, it's exclusive. And Mitrice, a young black woman, she ends up being treated in a way that just, it doesn't fit that picture.
No, not at all. And it makes you wonder right from the start about implicit bias, about how things might have played out differently if the circumstances...
I can't help but think about it.
So let's rewind back to that night in September.
Back to Jeffrey's.
What exactly happened?
Well, according to witnesses, Mitrice started acting, well, erratically.
Erratically.
Couldn't pay her bill, which was only $89.
$89, that's crazy.
Right. And so the police get called.
And this is where things start to get really, really complicated.
Oh, absolutely. Because it wasn't just a simple matter of not having the money.
Right. Her family and friends, they've said that her behavior that night, it seemed like a mental health episode, possibly even manic.
Yeah. And looking back, even her social media posts leading up to that night, they were a little off.
Off, yeah, like something was wrong?
Exactly. It's like she was already struggling before she even stepped foot in that restaurant.
Which makes the way the police handled the situation even more, I don't know, concerning.
Yeah, concerning is a good word for it, because instead of recognizing she might need help, they arrested her.
They arrested her for not being able to pay an $89 bill.
For essentially having what appeared to be a mental health crisis.
It's mind-boggling. And then they take her to the Lost Hills Sheriff's Station.
Right, and it's after midnight at this point.
After midnight, in a strange place. And here's where it gets truly, truly baffling.
They released her.
They let her go.
With no phone, no wallet, no way to contact anyone or get home.
Even if she refused to stay at the station, which is what the police claim, how is releasing someone in that state in the middle of the night in a place she doesn't know, how is that acceptable?
It's a huge point of contention in this case, right? There are laws in place to protect individuals in crisis, but were those laws followed? Were there protocol violations? Did they even try to assess her mental state? It's hard to see this as anything other than a massive lapse in judgment.
A massive lapse in judgment at best.
At best, yeah.
And this is the last confirmed sighting of Mitrice.
Last anyone sees her walking away from the station down a dark road alone, and then nothing vanished.
And for her family, the months that followed, it must have been a nightmare.
I can't even imagine the agony, the not knowing, the waiting, hoping for any sign of her.
And then almost a year later, the discovery of her remains.
In a remote area of Malibu Canyon.
A remote area, decomposed, clothing scattered.
And to make matters worse, the handling of her remains was, well, it was botched.
Botched.
Yeah. The coroner's report, it actually notes that her remains were moved by law enforcement before a full forensic analysis could be done.
You're kidding.
Nope. And that right there, it compromises the investigation, and it just adds insult to injury for the family.
It's infuriating. And in the end, the cause of death, undetermined.
Undetermined, no clear signs of foul play, but given everything that led up to it, it's hard not to see this as anything other than a tragic systemic failure.
A systemic failure. And Mitrice's case, it's not an isolated incident, right? This shines a light on so many larger issues that we as a society need to address.
Absolutely. Like, how do we handle mental health crises, especially when law enforcement is involved?
Were there racial biases at play in how Mitrice was treated?
And it brings us back to that contrast we talked about, Malibu, the affluence, versus Mitrice's experience.
Would things have been different if this happened somewhere else, if she wasn't a young black woman?
It's an uncomfortable question, but it's one we have to ask.
We have to, and for everyone listening, I think the takeaway here is that this case, it's a wake-up call.
It really is.
It reminds us that these systems that are supposed to protect us, they don't always work the way they should.
And sometimes they fail,
Yeah.
and the consequences, they can be devastating.
Exactly. So it's on us to ask the tough questions, to push for change, to make sure something like this doesn't happen again.
To demand better mental health resources, better training for law enforcement, more accountability.
Because who knows, maybe if Mitrice had access to those resources that night, things could have been different.
Maybe she'd still be here.
Her story deserves to be heard. Her family's fight for answers, for justice, it deserves our attention.
Absolutely. And I hope that by talking about this, by keeping her memory alive, we can help prevent another tragedy like this from happening.
I hope so too.
It's the least we can do to honor her memory.
And to make sure her story isn't forgotten.
Absolutely.
And that's all the time we have for this deep dive.
Right. But the conversation, it doesn't have to end here.
Nope, not at all. Keep researching, keep asking questions.
Stay curious, stay engaged, and keep fighting for a better world.